This past 48 hours, I've been thinking a lot about this past weekend, especially this whole process of welcoming people back to weekend Mass for the first time in months. And so, given all that, I thought I might share with you this call to action of sorts that I gave to our own parish community here in Oshawa, with the hopes that perhaps it might be helpful to you in your own parish communities going forward in the future. So our own experience here in Oshawa was that even though we were already limited to 30% of our regular capacity, it became pretty clear as the weekend progressed that a lot of people were still staying away because of fear. Fear of a potential second wave, fear of what Mass would be like, fear of even coming to church to begin with. And so given all that, again, I gave people sort of homework, if you will, at the end of most of our Masses. Homework with regards to the subject of evangelization and mission. And so as a bit of background, in our parish, we talk a lot about evangelization and mission, if only because Pope Francis says that the church is inherently missionary. And in the words of Paul VI, the church doesn't just have a mission, the church is a mission. Mindful of the fact that the mission of the church is to make disciples of all nations, as we hear in the Great Commission from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 28. Now that said, something I've often noticed during my time here as pastor of St. Joseph Worker Parish in Oshawa is that even though we've obviously tried to catechize the people with regards to evangelization and mission, there still seems to be this recurring tendency to reduce the call to evangelization or mission to something like Bible thumping in a coffee shop or engaging in some sort of fierce debate with regards to some obscure theological issue. But you see, in contrast, perhaps I might propose the example of this really great Christian author named Sherry Waddell, who wrote this really terrific book called Forming Intentional Disciples. And so in the context of this book, Sherry Waddell makes two really important points when it comes to evangelization and mission. And so first of all, what she basically says is that there are a lot of Catholics in this world who have been catechized and sacramentalized without having been evangelized, right? And so again, there are a lot of Catholics in this world who have been catechized and sacramentalized without having been evangelized. So that's kind of the first point. The second point she makes, though, is that when it comes to this whole process of forming intentional disciples, you have to acknowledge that there are a lot of different steps to move someone from being a nominal Catholic to becoming a fully fledged intentional disciple, in the sense of having the entirety of one's will being directed to becoming another Christ in this world. But quite apart from listing all the different steps that she articulates in her book, in terms of this whole process of becoming an intentional disciple, I just want to focus on the first step that she lists, which she basically names as trust. And it's kind of interesting. She names trust as basically this idea of giving someone a positive experience with something identifiably Christian or Catholic. And so again, the first step of trust, the first step in forming an intentional disciple, is to give someone a positive experience with something identifiably Christian or Catholic. In other words, long before someone starts asking questions about the faith or even considers joining a program like RCIA or Adult Faith Formation, that person needs to have a positive experience with something identifiably Christian or Catholic. Now, obviously, this can take a whole variety of forms, depending on who you are as the evangelist, who the person is, and where they are in a spiritual journey, and even the particular circumstances involved. But to give you a few examples, perhaps this experience of trust can be fostered by the beauty of the architecture of the church, or the beauty of the music, or simply the beauty of meeting someone who is joyful, especially where it's clear that the source of that person's joy is an actively lived out Christian faith. But more to the point, perhaps I might suggest that what people really need during this time of pandemic, what they really need during this climate of fear, is a positive experience conveyed by someone that they trust, that it's actually okay to come back to church. In other words, long before people are told what to actually do, concretely speaking, or how to process this experience of pandemic from a faith perspective, people need to be given that reassurance that it's okay. It's okay to come to church, to receive the Eucharist, to simply linger before the Lord in His sacramental presence. And so on that note, perhaps I might give you this call to action, if you will, that I share with our own parish community here in Oshawa during this past weekend, which is basically to say this. When people ask you about this past weekend, if you went to Mass this weekend, tell them about that. Tell them something positive about your experience of having gone to Mass this past weekend. And realize it doesn't have to be that complicated. Like, you don't have to talk about the homily, especially if you didn't like it. And you don't have to engage in some sort of complex theological treatise. It could be something as simple as, I went to Mass this weekend and it was fine. Or like, I went to Mass this weekend, I know people were worried, but it really wasn't a big deal. And that's it. But even if people don't explicitly ask you about your weekend, you can obviously initiate, right? You can begin a conversation. Like even in the context of social media, you can post an image. You can write a couple lines about your experience of having been back to Mass after several months. I mean, you can even share this video, like whatever, right? But whatever you do, make sure you are always authentic and personal. That always goes a long way when it comes to evangelization and mission. And realize throughout all this that your authentic sense of personalized witness can go a really long way in rebuilding a sense of trust amongst the people of God, such that they might find the courage within their hearts to return to the sacramental life of the Holy Catholic Church. And may God bless you all.